views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into episode 3 of The Ram with Coach Gaitley. Alongside my partner, Jackson Heil. I'm Jimmy Sullivan. Jackson, we've got a lot to catch up on.
Certainly do. I mean, A-10 play almost over, which is crazy to think about. It's been a while since we've done this show, but glad to be back with you, partner, and should be a pleasure as always.
Looking forward to it. Should be a great half hour. A lot to get to in this episode. But first, let's take a look back as we will be joined by Fordham women's basketball coach Stephanie Gaitley. And we are now joined by Stephanie Gaitley, head coach of the Fordham women's basketball team. Coach, how you doing?
I'm doing great. We've been with you guys. Couldn't be any better.
Almost through A-10 play. You guys sit at 9-4. What's been the biggest takeaway from the last couple of months of A-10 action for your team?
You know, obviously there was concern when we started off 0-4, you know, of just making sure we kind of got on track on all angles, you know. And then I think once we got past that first win against Northeastern, I think we started just to hit our stride. And I think the big win, I think that was the one that got us over the hump was Charlotte. You know, we could put a great defensive effort together, and and then we shot lights out. So that was a great example of you play great defense, you shoot the ball well, you can beat anybody on any given day, and we beat them there.
Coach, I remember you saying after you guys went to 0-4 in the year that you need to relook into scheduling, perhaps. But it seems like you guys have recovered pretty well from that. Do you still feel the same about that, or do you think that was more of just like an in-the-moment type of frustration thing?
I think it was both, to be honest. I think a lot of it was in the moment, just because we were sitting where we were sitting. Mm-hmm. But now when I look at it, with all those kids coming back, I got to look at it through different eyes. You know, because this team deserves to be challenged, and they deserve to. It's funny, we were just talking about scheduling today, and there was a high RPI team and a low RPI team, and I chose the high RPI team, the low high meaning in the better. The better. Yeah. Just because we have the pieces, and I think they should be challenged.
Coach, another thing that you had said earlier in the season was that there would be a little bit of a target on your back as the A-10 champs. People were maybe going to play you a little bit tougher. Have you seen that as being the case? Do you think that you're getting maybe tougher fights from other teams? I
don't know it's necessarily tougher fights, but there's just a respect for our program now that we've worked hard to get to. Like an example, we were Kids Day at St. Louis. Like you're picking the team that you need the extra help from to beat them. Because I watch tape against St. Louis, and sometimes there's 100 people in the stands, but every time we play them, they market it to be their big game. And so I think that's a sign of respect, and that's a sign of the fact that we've come a long way.
Coach, we've talked about identity a lot with you on this show, and it seems like you guys have kind of flipped your identity. At the beginning of the season, you called this one of your worst defensive teams. Now you guys are back to kind of where you need to be on defense, but the offense has kind of taken a step back. Yeah. What do you make of the transition that you guys have had as the season has gone along?
I mean, a lot of the roller coaster is two freshmen in the backcourt. I think that Sarah's not going to give you a lot of offense, but she's going to give you a lot of defense. And Anna's a freshman, so she's going to be up and down, which is typical of most freshmen. And to be honest, if I had to choose, I'd definitely want defense to be my first go-to, just because on any given night you can shoot the ball well. I mean, and that's been proven both individually for us and also collectively for us.
You just mentioned the two freshmen in the backcourt for your team, Anna DeWolf, Sarah Carpel, have started basically all of the games since mid-November. How do you feel about how they've fared this season? You've asked a lot out of them in their first year.
I mean, they've done great. I mean, if you look at us, we're sitting at third in the conference, and starting two freshmen in the backcourt says a lot. So, arguably losing two of your best team members, meaning teammates in Lauren and Mary, that a lot of what Lauren didn't show up in the stat sheet, and Mary obviously proved herself towards the end. But I think Sarah started to understand the importance of her role of understanding defense is what she's on the court for, and making good decisions with the ball. And she's not going to really light it up offensively, but hopefully her goal is to get other people the ball. And Anna, she's shown glimpses of just brilliance, and then there's times where she's a freshman. So that's going to happen in your freshman year. And as she gets older, I think you're going to see her best basketball coming forward.
You typically put a lot of emphasis on the little details, and always with not turning the ball over and playing good defense. Another thing where you guys have really excelled this year is at the free throw line. I mean, you guys are top 20 nationally in free throw percentage and on pace to be the best team in Fordham history in terms of making free throws. What do you make of that, and kind of how you guys have come along in that regard?
Well, we do a lot of free throw drills which entail pressure and practice. So I think anything you expect to happen in a game, you got to practice. And we are very selective at any games who we want to get the ball to, and we make sure that we set it up according to that. And obviously, Bree gets the line the most, and she's a great foul shooter, so that obviously comes into play. I just wish we got to the line more. We're one of the lowest in the conference, if not the lowest, as far as the number of foul shots we've taken. So the goal would be, with the fact that we're shooting the ball well, is to get there more.
Coach, you were talking about pressure, and when you started A-10 play, you had a tough schedule in January. You went 4-3 over that schedule. You lost to Dayton and Davidson and VCU. You've won 5 out of 6 now. You're at 9-4. How proud of your team being able to come from that point at around 500 with a couple swing games in the conference to be able to come back and now be near the top?
Really proud, because it's entailed us going on the road and winning, which we struggled with early. I mean, just going to UMass and winning there, and going to Richmond and winning there, with both teams having, UMass had lost a couple games, but anybody can beat anybody in this conference, and that's probably this is my close to 20th year, 19th year in the conference, and this is probably the most parity I've seen. There's no gimme games. Every game is a war. I mean, St. Joe's is one of the bottom teams in the conference, and they just beat Davidson at Davidson last night. So anybody can beat anybody, and I think that's kind of played out. So it's going to be an interesting end of the year.
You guys have had some crazy games in that as well, especially at home against Davidson, where you're 0 of 15 from 3 through 39 minutes and 58 seconds, and then Bree hits a big shot at the end. Take us through that moment for you.
Like you said, we were struggling to score, and so we got a couple defensive stops, and we set up a play, and we figured, depending on how they defended Caitlin, Bree was the option coming off that screen if Caitlin wasn't open. And funny thing is, Caitlin was wide open, but Bree saved her best for last.
Coach, final one from me. 5 out of the last 6 games, you've given up 50 points or less. Do you think you're playing where you need to play defensively in order to try to win this conference?
Absolutely. And I think we're getting good play from Meg Jonathan and Valisi, which makes a big difference. It helps us a lot, because then it helps us in the rotation, because then you have, Zara and those two, plus Katie McLaughlin's been getting some minutes. So now we have the confidence off the bench, which makes a big difference as you go into tournament play.
That's Fordham head coach Stephanie Gaitley. Coach, thanks for joining us. We'll have you back on towards the end of the show. Now we got to go over to the lineup with Carrie McMahon and Nicole Munger from the Fordham women's basketball staff. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Ram with Coach Gaitley. Now it's time for the lineup. Happy to be joined at the table by 2 members of the Fordham women's basketball staff, Nicole Munger and Carrie McMahon. Guys, how you doing?
Doing wonderful, thank you.
Doing great. Thanks for having us.
Nicole is the coordinator of recruiting and player development with the Fordham team. Carrie is the video coordinator this season. Guys, I'll just start you out with a quick one. How did you guys first get to know, first of Coach Gaitley and then of the Fordham program?
Of course. I was actually recruited by Coach Gaitley, so it was really cool to see it come full circle. So from the recruiting trial, I ended up going to a different program, and then I was actually in Florida with Fordham, and we were playing in a tournament as they were. And I ran into Coach Gaitley in the elevator, and we started talking, and then I literally walked in the door from graduation once I walked into my house back in Pennsylvania, and that's the exact moment that I got Coach Gaitley's text, and the rest is history. So I'm really thankful to be here, and thanks for Coach for the opportunity.
Nothing like good timing, right?
Yeah, perfect timing.
So I played in conference. I just graduated from St. Louis University. Always had a ton of respect for Fordham and the women's basketball program, obviously very well coached, a great group of girls as well. Came into contact with Coach at the A-10 tournament last season. My team had just lost to Duquesne in the quarterfinals. It was a game that ended our season. I was so upset that after the game I was still in my uniform and my headband, and I went down to the restaurant in the hotel with my parents, and we were just sitting there. Out of the blue walks in Frank Gaitley, coach's husband, and says, "What do you want to do?" And after college, and I said, "Oh, I really want to get into coaching." And he said, "Oh, well, lucky for you, my wife's the head coach." So he told me to get in touch with Coach Gaitley, and I did. One thing led to the next, and now I'm here at Fordham.
So you kind of addressed my next question, but for both of you guys, has coaching always been something that you wanted to get into after school?
Yeah, coaching's been a dream of mine since I was in middle school. I don't really know the reason for it, but I think I loved basketball so much. I always had such an appreciation for the coaches in my young career at that point. I was like, I want the opportunity to have an impact on a young person's life like they've had on mine.
Munger, same for you? Or?
Yeah, piggybacking right off what Carrie said, I knew all the coaches that have made such a big impact on my life, and getting to transform the younger generation and see the game grow. I always love that. And just the X's and O's I always find really interesting to see how it's like a chess match, how you can pick apart the defense or pick apart the offense on defense. So I love that part too.
For some background on you guys, Nicole, and both of you guys had illustrious college careers. Nicole, you were a 1,000-point scorer at Michigan. Carrie, you are, at least for a couple more weeks, the defending A-10 Defensive Player of the Year from St. Louis. The first year in coaching, has it been an adjustment, not going to class, getting on the floor? How much of an adjustment has that been for you guys?
It's definitely been a big adjustment, just from being, as you said, on the court, here, there, everywhere, with study hall and classes, and now it's more of just the grind of getting into coaching. But I think it's really cool just because we are so young and we can relate really well to the players, of just reminding them that even their struggles we can relate to, and just remind them that how to go through the process and how to go through the season, because there's always different thoughts going on during the season of, it's February, I feel tired, but so does everybody else. And just reminding them that from different programs' perspectives, because we have that perspective.
Yeah, I can completely agree with Munger on everything that she said. And additionally, coaching, it gives you kind of, the backstory of how everything comes to light. So you see all the work that goes into a scouting report. You see all of the work that goes into putting a recruiting schedule together. So you just see all those little details that you don't see as a player. And you see that in, the video aspect, the recruiting aspect, and then also the court aspect, putting a practice plan together. Why are we doing this for this team, but then something else for this team? So, the amount I've learned in such a short period of time is incredible.
Carrie, I'll stick with you on this one. We literally just played St. Louis, being Fordham. You went back to St. Louis,
Yeah.
Obviously, probably some bittersweet feelings, but what is it like going back to your alma mater and having to coach against them?
It's crazy, we played against St. Louis about a month earlier in the Bronx, which was awesome. But to go back, it made me so grateful for my 4 years at SLU, because I haven't been back to St. Louis since I graduated last May. So it's been 9 months, and I walked in the front doors, and despite being completely decked out in maroon and white in the Fordham gear, I was welcomed back with open arms. We were laughing about the same things we laughed about 9 months ago. My love for St. Louis, those are the best 4 years of my life. Wouldn't trade it for anything, and without St. Louis, I wouldn't be here. So just another thing to be so grateful for.
Guys, I'll ask you both this question, kind of a broad one, but if there was one takeaway, your biggest takeaway from your first year being on the staff, being assistant coaches, what would it be?
I think just the attention to detail and everything, and just how every little thing matters, especially with recruiting, just getting to know the kids through their social networking and different things. Just every little thing matters, and I think that's my biggest takeaway.
Completely agree. It's just the attention to detail. You can slip up on something that seems so small, and the impact of it can be so large. So the attention to detail is huge, and I can't imagine anybody that does it better than Coach Gaitley.
Throw this one to both of you. I've played pickup with both of you guys, especially Munger. I know Munger's given me the work in pickup plenty of times, but do you guys miss playing a lot? Is it hard to sit on the sideline and watch and be like, oh my God, I want to be out there so badly, or is it kind of dialed back a little bit as the season has gone on?
Oh, definitely. I think that'll always be just a part of me that, not playing anymore. But I think the growth that I've learned while not being on the court and having, like Carrie said, just taking a step back and seeing everything from the coach's perspective is just as great, because you're seeing all the different complexities of how to run a program. And like Carrie said, there's no better than Coach Gaitley to learn from. So.
No, completely agree. The moments that you miss, and I'm sure Munger can agree, the moments you miss are the celebrations in the locker room with your teammates. It's the little moments that you miss that you can't get back, like those locker room moments, the celebrations. the jokes that you have with your teammates. You obviously miss playing, but again, we get to go and play pickup. It's not the same, but basketball's still basketball. We still get to compete just at a different angle now that we're on the sidelines. But definitely those little moments that you get with your teammates, those are the memories that you're going to miss the most.
Nicole, Carrie, thanks for coming on with us. We really appreciate it. As part of the lineup, that'll do it for this segment. But stick around. We'll take you on the court coming up next. We'll be right back.
Hey everybody, welcome into On the Court. I'm Nick DeLuca. Pleasure to be joined by Fordham Rams women's basketball head coach Stephanie Gaitley, Carrie McMahon, and Nicole Munger. Coach, you're going to take us through a one-on-one offense-defense drill.
Well, heck, we've got two great examples of great offense and great defense. Nicole was a 1,000-point scorer at Michigan, and I actually recruited Nicole because she's a great offensive player. But then Curry, I had the pleasure, or actually not the pleasure, of having to play against Curry at St. Louis. She was the Defensive Player of the Year. She had my vote last year as well. So I'm going to let them take it from here of how Nicole's going to get a shot again as a great defensive player, and Curry's going to explain how she's not going to let Nicole get that shot.
Get the shot. All right, first to start, if I was going to get a shot off against a great defender, as we have here, if I was getting a screen, as in a down screen, I would walk Carrie in, make sure I make a lot of contact with her, and then I'd push away and come really tight off the screen. On my catch, I'd catch the ball, make sure my eyes go right to the rim, and then I'd shoot it. And go in.
So as a defender, especially guarding a great three-point shooter like Munger over here, I believe that there's two parts to a shot. The first part is the lift, so when the player has the ball and lifts it up to their head or their release point, and the second part is the release itself. On a great shooter, such as Nicole, my whole goal is to not let them lift a shot. So whether they're coming off of a screen action or a handoff action, I'm up on her the whole time. So if you just roll the ball out to yourself, I'm making it as hard as possible for her to lift that shot up to where she wants to release it, and making it as difficult as possible for her to get comfortable and to establish a rhythm with her shot. Shooters, oftentimes, they just want to get rhythm with their shot, feel the ball come off their fingertips, and for me, I just want to make them as uncomfortable as possible and give them as little room as I can.
Carrie, how would you defend like a Bree Kavanaugh that can shoot and go by and create her own shot?
The thing with Bree is that she's going to score. So you just want to make life as difficult as possible for her. So I have to respect her overall game. I have to give her enough space so that I don't get blown by on a drive, but I also have to stay high in my stance, high with my hand up to contest all outside shots. And the biggest thing is trusting myself and trusting my teammates and trusting the angles that I play Bree into. So at St. Louis, we played pack line defense. So I'm always looking, am I on the wing? Where's my next gap help? And I'm pushing her to that because I know I'm getting a stunt if I can get Bree to move 2 feet out away from where I am. So a lot of it is knowing your strengths as your own personal defender, but then also knowing where your teammates are to get some help, because guarding somebody as great as Bree Kavanaugh, it takes a whole team.
Clearly, you guys are looking to avoid fouls both offensively and defensively. You're trying to create the separation. How do you go about not getting called for the foul? You're trying to make it as difficult as possible, get a hand in the face, but don't want to be too aggressive. Where's the balance there?
Right. I think it's just a fine line of knowing where her hands are and where I can push off a little bit, but not drawing that line of extending my elbow and pushing off. And showing the refs, because as soon as you go open elbow, you'll get called for that foul. So for me, it's just getting close and making the contact with our bodies, and then just using a quick change of speed to get away from her, and then using the screen and just finding the rim as quickly as possible.
I think for me, refs in the past couple of years, they put a huge emphasis on the hot stove touch. So for me, I really have to make sure that my arms make no contact with the offensive player. You get that one touch to get a feel for where the player's at, and then you got to release. So for me, I really focused on using my body to create contact when I needed to, but then removing my hands from that player as quickly as I possibly could.
So what are you guys looking for in terms of understanding how exactly to best attack a defensive player or the best way to shut down a good scorer?
I think from the offensive mindset, it would just be taking my time and reading, but being also quick enough to move with the pace of the game. So I think that's just a fine line you have to find as a player of not going too fast, but still going fast enough to keep up with the game. So I would just have to read Carrie's feet and which way she's giving me and which way she's exposing, because they can't guard all three levels. So trying to find that level that they're giving up, as Carrie talked about when guarding Bree, and exposing that.
Yeah, from a defensive perspective, it really is just determinant upon what that offensive player does the best, and you want to limit them from doing their best as little as possible. So for someone like Bree, she plays so much differently than a Chastity Omagrosso or a Kaija Harbison at St. Louis. So really, it's trusting your coaches in the scouting report that they give to you, and then inferring that information and saying, you know what, Kaija has a great mid-range game. So I'm going to be up on her dribble, and I'm going to make her attack the basket, or I'm going to make her shoot set shots over me. So it's really understanding every player's tendency and then doing your best to take that away.
Offensively, defensively, at what point are you guys most comfortable in certain situations? Is it a spot on the floor? What makes you guys most comfortable to try and get a shot to go, or defensively, you're going to lock somebody down?
For me, I love playing defense out on the wing. Just with pack line principles, I know exactly where I have to force my player, and I know exactly where my gap help is going to be. I also loved picking up full court when I had the right matchup, but those were my two favorite areas to play defense in.
As a shooter, I just love getting a screen, and I had great screeners around me at Michigan, so I was super lucky, and great passers. So getting a screen, getting just a little bit of wiggle room, get away from the defense, and just be able to get a look at the rim. That was my favorite part.
1,000-point scorer, Defensive Player of the Year, head coach Stephanie Gaitley. Up next, we're going to be looking ahead to the rest of Fordham's A-10 slate as they move in to the conference tournament. Thanks, guys.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Thank you.
Starting to wind down here on the Ram with Coach Gaitley, but before we go, let's take an all-important look ahead. Coach Gaitley is back with us here on set. You guys have 3 games left in A-10 play before you get to the A-10 tournament in the beginning of March. What's the biggest thing you're looking for out of your team?
The way we play, I don't really, I mean, obviously you want to win those games, but I think it's how you're playing as you go into those games. And I think we played pretty well. I mean, we went to obviously a really good St. Louis team with 10,000 kids and took them to the wire. 5 minutes ago we're up 2. And so I think that game and our schedule has prepared us for what we're going to see down the stretch.
Dayton's obviously a team that stands out given what they've done in the Atlantic 10 this year, and that's certainly a game I think that you'd want back, especially with the way it ended with the call going the other way against you guys. How kind of geared up are you for Saturday? It just feels like that's the biggest game of the year for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think the kids are ready. I mean, I think like anybody, if you're competitive, you want to get back at something. I mean, Bree's texting me now. She goes, I just looked at our Dayton game, and then I looked at their game last night, and I want to know, how should I guard 42? Like the kids are just ready. Awesome. Like we're coming off a tough loss to St. Louis. We're having a team that's undefeated. You can't script it any better.
You as the seeding goes for A10 tournament time, and obviously you don't want to look at it too much, but right now you would be outside the top 2, so you would not get a first-round bye like you had last year. You'd have to play potentially 4 games in 6 days. How difficult of a task would that be for you and your team as you go ahead and try to win?
You know what? It is what it is. You know, we have won it that way. So I mean, it's not something we haven't done before. That when we won it in 2014, that we had to play at home. And so the biggest thing is getting that home court advantage. You don't want to have to go on the road, and we have 3 games to solidify that position. And still, things break our way, we can still squeeze into that 2 seed. So right now, it's just we got to take care of our business and not rely on what other people are doing.
In all likelihood, if you look forward to it, if you guys do end up with the 3 seed, you're going to end up playing St. Joe's probably twice in a row, depending on how the conference shakes out. What is it like preparing for a team that you literally have played about 4 days prior? I
mean, it's hard to say because St. Joe's had a big win at Davidson last night, so that it really could be juggled down the stretch. So that happened to us a couple of years ago, where we played St. Joe's at home. We lost by 1 at the buzzer, and then we played them a week later and lost again. And so been in that situation before, and so for us, it just, that's happened to us before. Actually, it happened with us with St. Louis one year, and so you got to take what's handed to you, and then just got to be as best prepared as you can be.
You talked about what you were looking for from the team in the last few games and just trying to play well. It is late in the season, but do you think your team has any room to grow in the last few games?
Yeah, I just think we need to be locked in for 40 minutes. Right now against St. Louis, I mean, obviously the one kid went off yesterday in the last 5 minutes and hit some tough shots. Kind of the reverse of what Bree did when they played us here. So I just think the defensive details, we have to be locked in. I'm never one that gets too upset about offense because there's so many uncontrollables. So, but from a defensive standpoint and a rebounding standpoint, we really, really need to hammer those home right now.
You talk about that, but also finding consistency offensively, I'm sure, is a key for you guys. What do you think the biggest adjustment that needs to be made down the stretch in order to find some consistency?
I just think I'm a big believer on identifying matchups and going at people, depending on what the matchups are. We've had a lot of success with it. And going with the hot hand. I mean, Bree struggled against Davidson, so, we called Kendall and Anna's number, So it just depends on who's got the hot hand and who you want to attack and where is the mismatch. We're pretty good about identifying mismatches and taking advantage of those mismatches. So, again, hopefully we get hot at the right time and we're working on all cylinders when we need to be.
You talked about all the offensive weapons you have, Bree Kavanaugh, Kendall Jeremiah, Anna DeWolf, all the great scorers you have who can go get you a bucket at basically any time. How hard do you feel like it is to get that all clicking at once? Because it feels like one person will go off, or the next game a different person will go off, but you haven't gotten, really since that Charlotte game, it's kind of been an uphill battle trying to get everything to click offensively.
It's hard to say. I mean, Caitlin Downey had a good numbers yesterday against Dayton, so she filled it up, and then Bree had good numbers, but Kendall and Anna struggled. So on any given night, getting all 4 going, I mean, it kind of goes back to that, the conference tournament. We had all cylinders going for the entire tournament. So if we can get it going at the right time, then that's the key to us being successful.
With all the parity in this conference, it seems like seeding may not even really matter at this point because literally anyone can beat anyone. Yeah. It's kind of the same on the men's side where anyone can beat anyone in any kind of situation this year. Could it be beneficial to you guys to have to play that extra game at home, just like from a winning perspective? If you win, you're going to have confidence going into the A10 tournament? Yeah,
I mean, to be honest, Jackson, I play it both ways as a coach. So, well, if you get the bye, I'm like, oh, it's great for the rest. If we don't get the bye, it's great to play. So as a coach,
you can spin it both ways.
Yeah, you can definitely spin that both ways. And for us, I think, having that game, if we're playing at home that day, it just gives you more time to work on things, and you're not going a week without playing.
Coach, it's obviously a long season, and you've been successful late in seasons going into conference tournaments. What's the biggest key when you get into the grind of the final few games, making sure your team has enough juice, stays engaged, and is able to get those big wins?
Well, this has been a grind, this stretch. That's why, I want to look up if everybody else has the same schedule, playing, 3 out of 4 games away and having to play 2. We were one of only 2 teams that had to play 2 kids games. That's a major advantage for that home team, especially at St. Louis when you got to fly out early. The only time you get on the court's the day before. That means an early flight, so that means an early wake-up call. And so for us, I think we've faced a lot of challenges already, and I think those challenges are definitely ones that I think will pay off.
In 3 or 4 losses in conference, you've had leads or at least been really tight in the fourth quarter. Is that encouraging, knowing that, like, in all your losses, pretty much, you've been in the game, and they've also been on the road, so that when you're going to see these guys again in a few weeks, like, you know you have a chance to beat them?
Specifically Dayton, because the tournament's there. So, I mean, the average margin for us at Dayton had been 23, a loss by 23, average losing by 23. So that was really key for us to know we could have, not necessarily should have, but could have won that game. And so for our kids, the mindset is there's no doubt we can beat them. So, which is great, obviously, going into this, last regular season game against them. But I just think us learning how to play on the road and staying close, we know if things break our way, then we can definitely beat anybody that's in front of us.
We talked about this in the first episode. By class year, by age, it's a young team, but it is a team that has a lot of experience. And included in that is winning the A-10 tournament last year. How much do you think that's going to help you going into this year's tournament?
Well, I mean, 3 key players, obviously, with Caitlin and Bree and Kenny, Kendall, and, but then you have the 2 freshmen, so a lot of the stuff is first, first playing in front of 10,000 people, first Kids Day at Davidson, a lot of first for them. So, for us, I think, do we have the experience? But the 2 key people from last year were, to be honest, Mary and Lauren, because they were the captains, they were the leaders, and, Bree was, the best player, but arguably, the most valuable were probably our seniors because of the leadership as well. So we have young leaders. I think that's the key for us right now, is getting those leaders to take us where we need to go.
All right, Coach, thanks as always for your time. Episode 3 of The Ram with Coach Gaitley. Thanks for everyone to tuning in. A huge thanks to everyone at BronxNet and WFUV for making this show possible. And special thanks to Coach Gaitley and the rest of the Rams for the inside access all season long. Until next time, for Nick DeLuca, my partner Jackson Heil, and the rest of our crew, I'm Jimmy Sullivan. Thanks again for watching, everybody. The Ram with Coach Gaitley is a production of BronxNet and WFUV Sports.